So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Harvard Business School, HBS. If this is your first time at HBS, please just stand up so we can see. Just stand up if it's your first time at HBS. All right, welcome. So my name is Kareem Lakhani. I'm one of the co-organizers of this symposium. I'm a faculty member at HBS and also the chair of the Digital Data Design Institute. Again, welcome again. We have an exciting program for us this afternoon. I just want to sort of set a bit of context for this symposium. May 31st of this year, 2025, will mark the start of the 375th year of Harvard University. So we've been in existence as of today for 136,948 days. And we're the oldest corporation in the Western Hemisphere. So I often remind people, especially business folks, that we're older than the U.S. government. Yet, today we face significant challenges. The core of our research, learning, teaching missions, how we get our missions accomplished, the ways in which we get accomplished are being questioned. Not by DC, that's a transitory thing. It's really about AI. And that's why we're here today, to understand and figure out how AI impacts the core of what we do as an institution that both builds knowledge, creates knowledge, but also transmits knowledge for the betterment of the world. So I'm delighted to kick off this session with an introduction to John Manning, who's the Provost of Harvard University and a law school faculty member. John's been at the university since 2004 and served as the Dean of the law school from 2017 to 2024. And then I think has the second busiest job right now on campus, from what I can imagine. He teaches about administrative law, federal courts, legislation, regulation, separation of powers, and statutory interpretation. All important things, apparently, but especially right now. But for us, what's important that he's a co-chair of the Gen AI Steering Committee at Harvard University. And so he's going to set the context for why we're having this gathering, and then we'll kick off the program. As a request, this is a Harvard-wide event, so please make sure you meet people outside of your circle of your particular school or your administrative function. And so I'd encourage you to meet at least 3 people from 3 different schools or 3 different areas, get to know them, exchange contact information, and then we'll have a little quiz at the end of the day to see how well you guys did as well, because we do that as well. Okay, with that, please, John Manning.
Thank you, Kareem. So it's great to be here. Really glad that you all attended today. I want to thank the co-chairs of this event, Bharat Anand, Klara Jelinkova, John Shaw, and Kareem Lakhani. They put together a fantastic event. My understanding is that there are 1,000 people signed up, plus walk-ins. So thank you all for being here. Give yourselves a big round of applause. This is a great turnout. I want to say 2 things that I love about this event. One is that it's about Gen AI. And obviously, it seems not like a dazzling insight to say that it is transforming the technical, social, business, medical, legal, every world we can imagine and touch is being transformed by AI. So it's important for us to understand it, study it, learn about it, and shape the future. Second, this is about work going on across Harvard. And that's what I love about this convening, that it cuts across Harvard. This is a one Harvard moment. It's a really important moment. The work has to take place collaboratively across our campus. So we've learned a lot over the last couple of years about the genius of our university. It's that great things happen in the schools and in our centers and in our programs and in our institutes. Great learning, generation of ideas, great teaching, things that advance knowledge. And this is happening in AI, to be sure. And I want to mention 3 examples. I'm just mentioning these as examples because there's so much that's going on. So first is D cubed. So what's going on in D cubed is amazing. 14, are we up to 14 labs now? 14 labs, fantastic work going on about how AI is shaping and being shaped by business and our economy and our society. So all 14 labs are fantastic. I just want to call out 3 that just strike me as super interesting. Customer Intelligence Lab, the Pricing Lab, and the Digital Emotions Lab, right? So we're studying really important things about the way AI is shaping business and business is shaping AI. And I'm very excited about the Foundry and how the Foundry is going to help bring AI resources to starting businesses. It's really quite amazing. Great work is happening at HBS. Second, I love what's going on at the Kempner Institute. I have to confess, I would have thought it highly unlikely that we could learn a lot about natural intelligence from artificial intelligence, or learn a lot about artificial intelligence from natural intelligence. But the Kempner team has proved that wrong in a very, very short time and has made great advances in the basic science of the mind and of computing and their relationship. I'm so excited about the work that's going on there. And third, I want to call out the great work that's going on at HMS in medical bioinformatics. And I want to share something that I learned from Bernard Chang, the Dean of Medical Education. So there was a patient who had epilepsy and dyslexia, but no unifying diagnosis. And before she came to Bernard, who was an expert in the confluence of these two disorders, she had waited 13 years for a diagnosis, 13 years. But Bernard's expertise aligned with her medical condition, which was paraventricular nodular heterotopia. It turns out that this rare condition was diagnosed very quickly by multiple LLMs once he fed her symptoms into the LLMs. And so what does this mean? It means that doctors will have to spend less time on diagnosing and will have more time to spend with patients. Now, I give these 3 examples to highlight that there's great work going on all around the university. And I could give many, many more. What's important and what's going on today through this great effort is that this work is being brought together so that we can learn from one another. And that's enormously, enormously important. I want to thank the Gen AI Steering Committee, the Research, Teaching, and Administrative and Operations Committees. We've been very one Harvard in a lot of ways. The AI Sandbox has enabled our community to experiment, to be bold, to make mistakes, to try new things, and to do it securely. That's been enormously important. I'm also grateful to all who have so rapidly and thoughtfully built our GPU capacity and found ways for us to share it across our campus. Amazingly, we now have 1,500 GPUs with 384 additional GPUs scheduled to be added this fall. And we are now the 3rd fastest academic computing center in the US. That's pretty amazing in a short period of time. I am very grateful to all of the faculty, the researchers, and the staff who have contributed so greatly to the advances in Gen AI teaching and research and applications here at Harvard, and to all who will make us even more one Harvard in this important work. Thank you, and all best.
One of those things when you don't know if you're supposed to push a button, but there are no buttons to be pushed, so good to go. Welcome, everybody. One of the great things about being at Harvard is that when we were starting to think about planning this, this wonderful event, we have so many experts, and we asked many of them, but one of them was too busy to talk to us. And so he referred us to his auxiliary self. And please hear his advice in the way that we had the opportunity to hear.
I've been thinking, how should Harvard University approach its first Gen AI Symposium? Well, first, we have to recognize that this isn't just a tech story. It's an institutional one. I've spent the last 2 decades studying how AI reshapes work, organizations, and industries. From automotive to aerospace to pharma, and yes, even education. And here's the takeaway. Well-established institutions don't get disrupted because they lack intelligence. They get disrupted because they lack imagination. So how should Harvard approach this moment? Boldly, openly, and with just enough discomfort to signal we're taking this seriously. Fortunately, Harvard has no lack of experts who can help us think about the prospects, possibilities, and pitfalls of Gen AI. We've assembled 3 here today that could give the Avengers a run for their money. John Shaw, whose idea of a fun afternoon includes navigating the total darkness of both underground mineral mines and research regulatory compliance. He'll speak to how Gen AI intersects with research and scholarship, the opportunities it opens up, but also the questions it forces us to ask about authorship, reproducibility, and integrity. Ask him about fault lines at the reception. And Klara Jelinkova, who's been steadily upgrading legacy infrastructure and pushing new technologies into production, at times simultaneously. She'll cover how AI is reshaping university operations and administration, from security and IT services to procurement and policy. And finally, Bharat Anand, who's been reimagining education since before it was cool, and now wants to use AI to personalize learning at scale. He'll focus on the role of Gen AI in teaching and learning, what it enables, where it disrupts, and how we stay true to our educational mission while evolving the classroom, whether in Boston or New York, or in any place taking a stern look at the future of education. Look for the case study later this summer. So returning to my initial question, here's the real answer. Harvard should approach Gen AI not just as a subject to discuss, but as a capability to build across research, teaching, and operations. That means experimentation. That means humility. That means partnership, listening, learning, and sharing. But most of all, that means imagination. This spirit, I'm looking forward to hearing from John, Klara, and Bharat with some opening remarks.
Well, welcome everyone. A wonderful afternoon to come together. Of course, that wasn't Kareem in the flesh, as you know. That was obviously his avatar, fueled by an LLM. Nevertheless, there was very sage advice that was provided for the university, really for our collective and shared mission to adapt, evolve, develop generative AI technologies in ways that support our core mission. One of the unique aspects of this gathering today, again, sort of resonating on some of John Manning's comments, this is the first time that we've really been brought together as a university to explore these topics, to share experiences, to think about ways that we can cross traditional boundaries, again, to advance all of our missions. We were brought together in this construct because 2 years ago we recognized that we needed an opportunity to adapt, to basically pump fuel basically into this ecosystem so that we could benefit, right, from the early stages of opportunity that technologies like this present. Harvard isn't always known for its rapid pace, and so that meant we did have to think creatively. We had to use imagination. And in particular, in the research space, it presented some challenges because we already had many leading researchers who were really at the vanguard of enabling and developing these tools and applying them in very creative ways. They were not just driving the path at Harvard, they were helping to drive the path around the world. And so with that capability, how could we think about sort of buoying essentially a broader community who had a lot more to learn, a lot more skills to develop, a lot more resources that were going to be needed to basically be enabled in this space. You know, research is often very tailored, right? And it doesn't always map in terms of its data sets, its tools, its capabilities across the full range of scholarship at a place like Harvard. So what we chose to do is think in a multi-pronged strategy about ways that we could prime the pump, by providing capability. And that capability comes in a number of different forms. As John had mentioned, it means investments in GPU computing. And it doesn't necessarily just mean separate distributed investments in GPU computing. It means bringing these resources together in ways that can be scaled for really the important grander challenges associated with generative AI. It also means not just the hardware, of course, but it means the software expertise, the software engineers who are so critical, basically, to advancing this field and this capability, and ones who had the ability to connect and to translate to different practitioners across the range of scholarship that's represented at this university. One of the things that my office does beyond dealing with the federal government and the way they sponsor our research portfolio, so if I seem a bit distracted today and I'm looking at my phone, my voicemail, you'll understand why. But one of the challenges that we recognize in this space is that we have an opportunity through the university to provide resources that particularly help early career researchers basically get an initial start in a particular area. And if we had taken the traditional path of thinking about, well, let's develop a new thing that looks like those, but is focused on generative AI, I would say we probably on average would have been putting out the first call for proposals probably in a couple of months from now. We needed to be much more rapid. And so one of the ways that we did that is we took a long-established funding program, something called the Milton Funding Program, which many of you have heard about, and we simply adapted it overnight. And we provided this as a mechanism to which faculty and researchers could apply across the university to get initial seed grants to do great work. And we're going to have an opportunity to hear from many of the faculty who have been resourced through this program, through other programs in D-Cubed and around the university, who really sort of got, in a way, a kickstart from this funding that was provided in almost near real time. We also then thought, where is the greatest creativity and ingenuity going to come from in our community? Where's that going to come from? The students, right? So we couldn't forget about the students. And so we rapidly worked with the college to support a new program. URAF is the broader name of the mechanism that actually supports these activities across the schools. And so what we did is we encouraged faculty and students to come up with their own creative ideas of things that they would like to do. And we provided essentially summer scholarships for students. And literally, we put this program together in a couple of weeks. We were a little worried that we wouldn't have enough people wouldn't be aware of this, we wouldn't have enough applicants. We basically filled this up within a matter of about 2 weeks. And so we were able to support 51 Harvard undergraduates who are going to be working with faculty across a range of schools over the course of the last summer, and we're going to have an opportunity to hear from them today. Of course, we're continuing this kind of support through different mechanisms across the university, and so if we convene again in a year, we'll have another opportunity, of course, to see another generation of students who've been supported by this effort. So with that, I will turn it over to Klara Jelinkova.
Thank you. I'm always fascinated by the number of pronunciations of my name in any given meeting. Very well, everybody. So let me just talk a little bit about the administration and operations track in this committee. As John Manning described, there's a steering committee that Meredith Wienig and John Manning steer and make sure that we are all staying on the straight and narrow. And then there are the subcommittees or committees that are research, administration, operation, and teaching and learning. And so I'm talking about the administration and operation one. In the administration and operation, we have basically two main goals. The first one is making sure that our community has the right tools and the right guidance in order to do exploration and ethical use of AI. And two is advancing administrative innovation. And so using generative AI to streamline processes, improve service, and free up time so administrators can really focus on the core elements of their jobs. So let me start a little bit with the guidance work that we have. As you know, one of the unique things about technology is that it spans the globe. It spans time zones and also spans cultures. And so that means that even though we in some areas are focused on the US, with technology, we need to be very cognizant about what is happening globally. And so in order to address emerging legislature across the globe, we have started the EU AI Act working group. This is a working group that has representatives from OGC, OVPR, risk management, Hewitt, and across the schools that looks at different use cases across Harvard and advises people who are bringing AI to bear in how it should be used and what are different pitfalls. So for example, we have issued a blanket language that should be used and is required to be used for AI tutor bots that are being distributed in the EU, so that boilerplate language is available to you. We also issued a memo on the EU AI Act prohibited uses that primarily have to do with surveillance, social scoring, and really adverse effects that AI can have on individuals if it's not used ethically. And we also advised about roughly 20 different use cases. So the relationship between humans and machines and humans and AI is really core to any sort of regulation around the world. And so in the session that is titled AI Regulation, Compliance, and Ethics, we have organized it from the easiest, which is regulation, to the hardest, ethics. And we want to really explore those ideas and those concepts in a little bit more depth. So come and see it, especially if your work is in student technology, policy, or you're working on a global footprint of your programs. So let me shift to the administration innovation side. So we are also through the committee looking at practical innovation. And we oversaw 4 enhancements to the AI sandbox and also the AI Zoom companion pilot. The team is advising us on engagements with commercial providers. The emphasis for us is really managing costs while maximizing utility. But of course, what matters is how these tools are used to change our work and how they're being integrated into our workflows. And so to that end, the committee is tracking different innovative use cases. That starts with the EVP AI Innovation Program that Meredith has sponsored and goes to different programs that are within the schools. And we are looking at how what works, what doesn't, which needs to be reshaped. And so we have a really cool session that has to do with innovative use cases in administration, where several of our leading practitioners are going to share what worked and what hasn't in the administrative space. So that is all on the administrative and operations track. But as much as it would be fun to have the digital twin describe the D3 sessions, it falls to me to do so. And so the D3, in case you don't know, is short for Digital Data and Design Institute at Harvard. And it's really a university-wide experimentation platform that reaches beyond the university, obviously, to private industry as well. Today's sessions in the D3 track are reflecting the core ethos of D3, which is to use design thinking, data science, and digital tools, not just to understand the world, but to build a better one. So the first session explores how generative AI can translate complex research and clinical information into clear, visual, emotionally resonant communication, something that we can all benefit from, and I think is extremely important across all of these 3 tracks. And the second session, in this session, our colleagues will examine how AI can address 2 of the society's most pressing problems: equitable refugee resettlement and the transition to low-carbon economy. And so we are going to see how AI can help allocate resources in an equitable way and track climate-forward business practices more intelligently. So let me just close by acknowledging that we are still very early in working with generative AI, and these tools are really becoming our junior coworkers. But what we are, beyond pilots, guidance, experiments, what we are really doing is to create shared institutional capacity. So Harvard is prepared to not just react, but to lead in this space. And with that, let me hand it over to Bharat.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just for the record, my name is much harder to pronounce than Klara. And in case you might have noticed, it took 5 iterations to get that avatar of Kareem to pronounce it. And I finally gave up. I said, forget the Hindi pronunciation, just pronounce it any damn way you want. That's how flawed it is, okay? It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm Bharat Anand. I've been chairing the Harvard Gen AI Teaching and Learning Working Group for the last year and a half. And much like John and Klara was saying, there's been a lot of work underway, broadly under 3 buckets. In the initial phase was much more around policies, security, IP, copyright, just what is it we can level set on. The second was tools and access, and so with the help of Hewitt, they created the sandbox. Emily Bottas is here, who led that effort, and that's been obviously iterated over time. And the third was creating resources, just resources for the community that we can educate ourselves on what's happening across the university, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. I just want to start by saying a couple of things about today. The first is, and I speak for many other members of the working group in saying many of us were not Gen AI evangelists. And so I think when we look at the symposium today, I think honestly it'll be much more meaningful and useful if we look at it from the perspective of not Gen AI as an end in itself, but how can Gen AI help address some of the core issues we're confronting in higher education, whether it's cost or access or cultures of expression, which you will hear something about later today. I think those are really the critical questions, and it's a fascinating set of conversations in the breakouts and the plenary you'll hear today on how can we actually use Gen AI to address some of these questions. The second I will confess is I don't particularly care about 95% of my LinkedIn feed, which basically talks about the next great tool leveraging Gen AI. That's a prediction game, by the way, we're never going to be good at. And in fact, if we play that game, I think we're ceding the conversation to those on the technology frontier, as opposed to playing to our strengths. That leads me to my third point, which is when I put my strategy professor hat on, the questions I often find myself asking are, what is it we can do to best serve our students today, to help our research, and in the longer term, to create something here at Harvard that is robust to whatever the trajectory of intelligence is. And by the way, that's a very, very hard question to answer. I will also say that I got interested, actually really interested in Gen AI after realizing 3 key things. The first is, and some of you have heard me say this before, that its power really is not just about the intelligence. The fact that a tool as flawed as any Microsoft product could be has experienced the fastest technology adoption in history must be due to something else. And I think that something else is that simple interface that suddenly made the power of AI accessible to every person on the planet, whereas earlier it was confined to software engineers, tech experts, and coders. Access is fundamentally critical here. This is not about the personal computer or smartphone, in my view. This is about Windows 3.0 versus DOS. Now, when we think about it that way, I think that gives rise to the second point, which is anyone can experiment. And I think what Hewitt has done with the sandbox is allow reasonable and responsible experimentation. By the way, early on, we had a whole bunch of faculty and many, many students playing with this. About a year ago, we videotaped about 35 to 40 faculty across the university, several of whom are here. These are 5-minute videotapes, everyone answering the same questions. What is it that you were trying to solve? What problem? How did this help? And what did you learn? This is all on the Faculty Voices webpage. You can just go and click in Google and see that. Those are fascinating stories. And there's some things we learned, which is how are faculty using it? They're using it to surface real-time questions in the classroom. They're using it to generate synthetic assessments, which they can then use as opposed to spending days and weeks trying to create these assessments. They're using it to provide feedback to students in real time. They're using it to summarize course evaluations. They're using it as peer bots. By the way, every one of these examples boils down to one thing, which is it's not replacing expertise, but it's saving time and cost. It's automating the mundane. And I think the key insight for me was, imagine a tool that on any given task might not be as good as the human, but can actually save time on many, many tasks, despite being flawed. So my big realization was, actually, this is, get ready, the Ryanair of academic work. This has to go viral. The third thing, I think, is when you start thinking about what this means for us as educators. What's the real role and purpose? And just to share a story, every year we have reunions coming up in about a couple of weeks. A few years ago, we had an alum at Harvard Business School who came back, and like many others, he said, I remember the transformative experience that I had here. And I said, what are the 3 most important ideas or concepts you learned? He said, I don't know. I said, okay, let's make it easier. How about 1? He said, I can't remember anything. So I said, how was it transformative? He said the fact that we were actually listening to each other, trying to make decisions in real time, under pressure, that was the real learning. By the way, it forces you to think about what we're really teaching and learning. I've been reflecting on this. When we learned trigonometry in school, like, did we actually use it? Or was it really about learning logic and proofs? When we learn language, is it really about language or is it about empathy? And so on and so forth. And I think those are the questions we'll have to fundamentally ask in thinking about what our role as a university is. So as you think about today and listen to the speakers who are amazing and go to the breakout sessions, I'd love for you to keep in mind 3 things. 1, there's a lot of resources at the university available to each one of us to actually learn about what's happening, surface ideas and share, and some of that you'll learn today. The second is, can I just get a show of hands? How many students here today? By the way, this is pretty remarkable. We scheduled this during exam period, and 100 students registered. I just want to recognize you all. Thank you all for coming. And my big point is we have to engage with our students. One of the most interesting conversations I've had about Gen AI was when I had my daughter over, 15 of her friends, and I literally dropped the Gen AI bomb, and it gave rise to behavioral conversations that I was not aware of. We cannot be treating this as an us versus them. This is we're all in this together. We've got to figure it out collectively. And the third is the strategic question, which is what is our role and purpose as a university? With that, let me just highlight 2 breakouts on the teaching and learning front. One is going to be on the topic of assessments, which is probably one of the most burning topics. And the second is about chatbots. Just what have we learned? Like, what's their value? Who benefits? How? Et cetera, et cetera. That's one of the other breakouts we'll hear.